with number 20. Lost Judgment is a multi-platform game, but it is incredibly awesome. If you didn't play the previous game, Judgment, that's okay. This game does a decent job of setting you up. Essentially what this is like a spin-off of the Yakuza games, but with more of an emphasis on detective work, chasing down perps, and of course, kicking ass. The story this time around takes you all over a new district as well as a fully fleshed out high school, which is a weird setting for a game like this, but there's tons of different side options and side quests to pursue. You can skateboard out in the open world. And if you've played any of the games from this studio, you know that the combat and the side quest writing and all the quirkiness of it all, the mini games, everything, it's all top notch. If you've never played a Judgment game, there's only two, obviously, but this one is a good place to start. Now, next over at number 19, Green Hell is a game that really surprised us because on the surface, it might look like your run-of-the-mill generic survivor game where you're just a guy stranded on an island and you need to craft and eat to stay alive, but there's a lot more to it. It's really single-player story-based, and it's incredibly interesting. There's a very cerebral story here that will probably surprise you. It really hooked us. Green Hell has been a thing for a while on PC, but this year it finally got its big debut on consoles, and it's definitely worth the wait. If you're looking for a little bit more of an indie-style game, but that tries some interesting new things in a genre that you kind of thought was in its twilight years, Green Hell is awesome. Now, next over at number 18, we have Hitman 3. This released at the start of 2021 for all the major platforms, and don't forget about this one when you're making your own personal Game of the Year lists, because Hitman 3 is incredible. It takes what IO Interactive has tried to do with the World of Assassination trilogy and finally knocks it out of the park. You probably remember these games kind of being like episodic, then kind of live service updated games. The release model was confusing for the average person who doesn't really pay attention to Hitman, but now with Hitman 3, they got it all nailed down, and they've really perfected the gameplay and level design to a degree that we didn't even expect to see. Some of the moments in this game are so incredibly memorable, and the best part is that you make your own fun here. It's challenging, it's freeform, you have a million ways to tackle your targets, and the amount of hours you get out of this thing messing around and playing and having fun is unmatched. Definitely don't forget about Hitman 3. Now, next over at number 17, we have Fist, or F-I-S-T, Forged in Shadow Torch. This is an action Metroidvania style game, but definitely not like any of the other ones you've seen. There are quite a few out there, but none of them really look like this insane over-the-top sci-fi aesthetics with a 2D plane, but with 3D graphics, incredibly detailed characters, and a really cool combat system. You play as Rayton, a seemingly cute and cuddly creature who actually has a sci-fi mechanical arm, and you travel through these environments exploring and kicking ass. The combat's cool because you have to pay attention. There's a lot of challenge between that and the platforming and of course the Metroidvania elements, and it's definitely something you should keep on your radar. Next over at number 16, we have The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Now, people for years have been enjoying the Ace Attorney games, but The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles are a new adventure, a different, more spin-off adventure. It's 2 games in this collection, and they're really tied together and they're worth experiencing. You are once again a sleuth, going through the process of gathering evidence, doing the research, and of course, doing those awesome courtroom showdowns, yelling objection, presenting your clues, interviewing witnesses, but with a little bit more of an old-school, old-timey flair this time around. These adventures are absolutely worth experiencing, just like all of the Ace Attorney games, and we're glad that they're on the PlayStation platform. Next over at number 15, we have Deathloop, which for a lot of people feels like all of Arcane's best ideas thrown into just a crazy, chaotic sandbox. Deathloop is a time loop game, but it's a little bit more confusing than that, but it is also more compelling than you'd ever expect. This game wants you to have fun murdering people, and it wants you to experiment with your abilities and stuff. It's not the most challenging thing in the world, but it is incredibly fun to play, and it's cool to explore these environments, learn the ins and outs of all of your targets, all of which you need to assassinate in one time loop. That's how you figure out this whole game. It has cool weapons, a quirky art style, memorable music, and just like I said, fun gameplay, most importantly. It's like playing a Dishonored game where you don't really have to worry too much about setting off any alarms because you were just such an overpowered badass. If you like any of Arcane's games or just really creative outside the box first-person shooters that make you think a little bit more, definitely check out Deathloop. There's a reason why it's making so many Game of the Year lists. Next, over at number 14, we have Life is Strange True Colors. Once again, we get a new adventure in the Life is Strange storytelling vibe, but a new character with new powers and a whole new host of problems to deal with. It seems like their writing has gotten much better this time around, and if you like those games and you're looking for a cool new adventure, True Colors should satisfy. Next at number 13, we have Guilty Gear Strive, which looks out of this world, and yes, in person with the game running on your PlayStation, it does look this good. The art style is improved, the animations are absolutely out of this world, and it really just solidifies Guilty Gear as one of the premier fighting games. Arc System Works knows how to make a gorgeous fighting game, and really at this point they're just flexing. They're just showing off. This one definitely takes some practice. It's a little tough to get into, but it's fun to master. If you've never played a Guilty Gear game, Strive is a good place to start with this version. Trust us. Next, over at number 12, we have the Dark Pictures anthology, House of Ashes. Now, if you guys know that the developers behind the Dark Pictures games were the people who made Until Dawn, which was an incredibly fun cinematic PlayStation exclusive experience that we loved from many years ago, but the Dark Pictures anthology hasn't really quite lived up to the hype. Thankfully, that changed with House of Ashes, their newest one in this anthology. It's pretty sweet. It's like they learned all their mistakes from the previous games, combined it all, and made for a really cool story in an unconventional setting. It's a horror story in a place you wouldn't expect. And if you like horror games and you like more like playable cinematic style games, definitely consider House of Ashes. Even if you skip the other ones, this one is a really good one. Next, over at number 11, we have Persona 5 Strikers. If you played Persona 5, one of the best JRPGs seriously ever, and you want more of these characters and more of this world, Strikers is a great place to jump in. It ditches the deeper turn-based JRPG stuff for more of an action battler brawler, but don't discount it at all. This is still a hell of a Persona 5 experience. You've got all the characters, you've got the music, you've got their moves, you've got the creatures. What more can you want other than just a PlayStation 5 version of Persona 5? I'm just messing though. Seriously, Persona 5 Strikers is cool. Next, over at number 10, we have It Takes Two, which, like I've said in previous videos, actually won the big Game of the Year award at the Game Awards livestream event. And a lot of people were like, huh? What game is that? I've never even heard of it. And that's a shame because this is a really awesome cooperative adventure experience. What it essentially is almost like a PG-13 Pixar movie that you play through. You play as two parents who get shrunk down into little toy versions of themselves, and you go on this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style adventure to save your daughter and maybe your marriage that is on the rocks. And what you get is a really compelling, funny, and heartfelt adventure with gameplay scenarios that are always changing. First, it's a platformer. Then it jumps to third-person shooter. Then it jumps to a flight game. Then it's a downhill snowboarding game. It's paced really well, so every hour you're doing something completely different, but none of it feels half-assed. It all feels really fun to play. This was a massive surprise this year. It is from, of course, the creators behind Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, and A Way Out. So if you're looking for a cooperative thing to play with somebody, find your significant other, find your best friend, sit them down and play this because it is absolutely worth experiencing. Now, next, down at number 9, we have Chivalry 2. This multi-platform, multiplayer game is an absolute hell of a surprise. I was blown away with how much I love this one. It's essentially first or third-person medieval combat action. It dumps you and a bunch of players into a castle siege or a battlefield showdown or pillaging or whatever, and you choose from a bunch of different classes and you engage in not super realistic, but more involved sword fighting than you'd expect. You have to block, parry, manage where you're holding your weapon. There's a bunch of damage and blood and gore, and it is so satisfying. There's nice progression where you level up and you gain new banners, paint colors, armor pieces for your knight. Each class has different subclasses with different trinkets to use and different weapon types, and it's really fun to experiment, and it's getting updated with new content. Chivalry 2 is turn your brain off competitive fun, and it's absolutely worth it. Now, next, over at number 8, we have Back 4 Blood. This is a spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead with a lot of the original people behind it. And although this definitely doesn't reach the heights of Left 4 Dead, you still get that same good nostalgic feeling when you're playing this, especially if you got a good group. It's a cooperative adventure with levels where you race through and try and get to the end and complete the objectives while fending off hordes of zombies and higher level zombies that have unique traits like spitting stuff and using their weird tongue or exploding. You probably probably know the gist if you've played Left 4 Dead. It's very much that here, but it's prettier, it's crazier, it's messier, and there's more of it. It's chaotic, and like we said, it's definitely worth experiencing with some friends, if you got them. Next, over at number 7, we have Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which we've been talking up quite a bit as one of the biggest surprises of the year. We're going to be honest, we judged a book by its cover. The reveal trailer and everything didn't look so hot for us, especially coming hot off the heels of Marvel's The Avengers game, which a lot of people weren't into. This is another Square Enix thing, but thankfully they took the complete opposite approach and gave us a single-player, narrative, story-based adventure. And it is beautiful and fun and really just a perfect Guardians of the Galaxy thing. The combat revolves around you running around shooting people as Star-Lord and commanding all of your other crew members to do attacks. The gameplay isn't the best thing in the world, but it's still fun and satisfying, especially if you amp it up to higher difficulties. But the real thing here is the story. The characters are compelling, the story is heartfelt, and it's absolutely genius how they kind of bait you in with it kind of seeming like a familiar interpretation of Guardians of the Galaxy and really fleshing out these characters in new and exciting ways. You seriously should not miss this one. Play it at some point, especially if you're a comic book fan. Now, next over at number 6, we have Scarlet Nexus. This was a pretty cool, pretty surprising JRPG where you play as either a male or female character with telekinetic powers, and how that integrates it into the combat is a ton of fun. The gameplay is hack and slashy, it's action-packed, it's focused around dodging and using your abilities, and how the game integrates throwing objects with your mind, with your telekinetic powers into the gameplay loop is so satisfying, and that's the best part of this game. There is also a deep story and some really cool, creepy monster designs and an open hub world to explore, but our favorite thing about it is the combat. Next, over at number 5, sticking with JRPGs, our favorite one of the year is Tales of Arise. This game's combat is out of this world. The way you use your team party members to kind of combine and do these cool ultimate attacks, it is so satisfying. A lot of RPGs have done this style of combat, but Tales of Arise just feels just right. Not to mention the world they built and the incredibly interesting and cool looking characters. There's a ton of variety to the biomes and just the adventure itself, and they built a really interesting tale here, which thankfully you don't have to have played the previous Tales games. This is a new adventure and you can jump in and have a ton of fun. And you probably will. If you like JRPGs, this thing better be on your list. Next, over at number 4, we have Kena, Bridge of Spirits. Yes, that's actually how you pronounce it. This is a really fun, traditional action-adventure game where you play as Kena, a guider of spirits. She enters a new land that has been ravaged by a tragedy, and she's essentially putting the pieces back together to see what happens, and she's using the help of these local little gross creatures called the Rot. You collect these things, and they follow you around, and they're like cute, quirky little things, and they power up your attacks. And the combat's pretty satisfying with the staff and these abilities and a bow and arrow and just more tricks and magic stuff you get along the way. You're exploring this world, you're solving puzzles, and it is absolutely a gorgeous game. It looks like a tech demo and concept art come to life, but it's thankfully really fun to play with some really good boss battles and surprisingly steep difficulty spikes. This game can get pretty challenging by the end, but it is definitely worth checking out. Now, next over at number 3, if we're talking about difficult, we gotta mention Returnal. Returnal is not for everyone, but it is an absolute blast to play. I mean, look at this thing on screen. It's third-person shooter mixed with a bullet hell shoot-'em-up style game, and it is the perfect marriage. This studio has done stuff like this in the past, but Returnal is really the pinnacle of it. This is a challenging game because it's run-based, so if you die, you start back at the beginning, but the way it loops the story in is incredibly interesting. You play as Celine, a stranded astronaut on this mysterious alien planet trying to piece together what happened, and let's just say it goes places. So not only do you have this really tight, gripping, challenging combat, cool weapons, satisfying feedback to the weapons, but you also have really good sci-fi atmosphere. This game is gorgeous and cool and moody, and it is worth experiencing, especially if you like a challenge. Now down to number 2, we have Resident Evil Village. This 8th mainline Resident Evil game strays from the formula once again, even further from the survival horror formula of 7, and goes for more of an action-based thing. It's kind of like the first-person Resident Evil 4. You've probably heard that a million times, but it's really interesting this time around with a really crazy roller coaster ride of a story with incredible characters, weird, gross creature monsters, cool bosses, and Ethan, the main character from 7 and this, feels way less less generic this time around, and it's way more interesting. And of course, you've got Chris Redfield in this game, doing his Chris Redfield thing. If you're a classic Resident Evil fan, that's a good thing to see. While it might not be the scariest Resident Evil game by far, it can be challenging and interesting and gory and gross in all the right Resident Evil ways, and it also just looks gorgeous, not just from the graphics engine or anything like that, but just from the visual style. The architecture, the environment design is out of this world. If you're looking for a spooky adventure from a 2021 game, this is it. Now, down to number 1, of course, it's Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. We finally got a good old-fashioned Ratchet & Clank game on PlayStation 5, and not only does it look absolutely bananas with you being able to load in new worlds instantly because the world is being ripped apart, but also you just get a good, solid playing classic Ratchet & Clank game with fun levels, great enemy encounters, cool weapons to upgrade and experiment with, and on-rail grinding and gliding and jumping and riding, and really everything you expect from all of these games kind of combined into this one. It also introduces a new character, Rivet, who surprisingly is pretty awesome. They did a really great job looping her in and making her just as interesting as Ratchet with her own cool companion. It makes her a really interesting story and adventure, and one that you're going to want to see through to the end. If you're like me and you just like good old single player action adventure games and platformers, and if you're from that generation, this will remind you why you love this stuff so much. It certainly did for me. But those are 20 PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games worth checking out in 2021. These are what we think are some of the best, but we want to hear from you guys in the comments what you're playing. If you got your own top 5, your own top 10, or your own top 20, definitely please let us know. Now, if you enjoyed this video though, and we helped steer you in the right direction, maybe informed you about a new game, clicking the like button's all you got to do. It really, really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.